Hey, good people, Davia here, and welcome to another episode of Tales from the Shaker, Davia Williams Stevenson podcast. Y'all, I want to give a little bit of a warning for this podcast. I think it's a very, very important topic we're going to cover, but it's sensitive. We're going to be talking about sexual abuse, particularly childhood survivors of sexual abuse, and resources, providing resources for help. So if you got young children around while we're having this conversation, use your discretion. Decide if they need to be in another room or if this is something they need to hear. You use your discernment, but I want you to tune in and I want you to be prepared to share this with folks. Far, far too common. All right, so my guest today, thank you for being here. It's Nicole Bromley. Nicole is an activist, an advocate, an author. She is a survivor herself of childhood sexual abuse, and she has turned her experience into a vehicle of deliverance for a number of people, where folks can feel seen, heard, validated, and have resources and community to move through their stories. It is an unbelievable use of what could have been I don't want to say life-ending, but certainly story-affecting, changing experience. And so thank you for your vulnerability. Thank you for your strength. And thank you for your message. I'm going to read a little bit of your bio, and then we'll see where the conversation takes us. Like I always say in my podcast, I don't know what the first question is going to be. We just have a conversation, and we'll see where it leads. But I am convinced of this. Every time something in what you say, someone is going to identify with, and they're going to use that information to inspire them or to shake something up in their own stories. So thank you for being willing to do this. Yeah. All right, so Nicole is devoted to spreading a powerful and vital message across America and around the globe, both in her books and in her internationally recognized keynote, Our Little Secret. Nicole uses her own life story to break the silence on sexual abuse and to bring hope and healing, empowering others on a journey from victim to victory over impossible circumstances. Her website, her materials are one voice. Voice is an acronym, victory over impossible circumstances. I just learned that as I was reading the books, refreshing myself on the books today. Nicole has offered several books, Moving from Silence to Healing After Childhood Sexual Abuse, Breathe, Finding Freedom to Thrive in Relationships After Childhood Sexual Abuse, and Soar, a companion workbook to Hush, and a DVD series for personal and group study that she is, oh, and you have another one in the works. I didn't see that. And this may be, is this current? Are you still in the works? A new curriculum in the works. Okay. She's the founder of One Voice, and I told you what the acronym is, as well as the founder and executive director of One Voice for Freedom, a nonprofit organization focused on stopping child sex trafficking around the world. I would keep reading, but I'm hoping that some of this will come out in our conversation. Important work, very important work. And I imagine very, I guess the question I want to ask is, how did you know, after you have come through your healing, if it was after or during, you tell me about your story, how did you know that you were meant to go into this work, to try to free other women?
Good question.
Yeah.
Well, when I was 14 is when I finally found the courage to tell, after about 10 years of sexual abuse by my stepfather in my home. And I think after that point, it was like I wanted to keep this a secret again, because I was afraid of what people would think about me if they knew what I'd gone through. And so I was really scared. I mean, I never would have dreamed of being a voice on this topic at that point.
Yeah.
And we can get into some more of my story and, you know, what unfolded after I told. But a year later, I was invited to a church camp. I was 15, and I remember getting up in front of this whole camp of youth and telling my story.
You didn't know you were going to do that at the time?
Yeah. And it was this time
Wow.
that they had an open microphone. Anyone could talk about something that God did for them that week or whatever. I mean, I remember one girl getting up and talking about the boyfriend she found at camp. I'm like, girl, what are we doing? But for some reason I felt compelled, and I just remember I was in my seat and then I wasn't, and I was up there and I was telling just very briefly about the abuse, and that, I felt like God was, helping me to almost rewrite my story. And this was the very beginnings of that. And I went home and I remember thinking, oh my gosh, what did I do? I will never have a boyfriend from camp at this point, but that was the time when we had pen pals and people would write letters after camp. And so I remember a few days went by and I ended up getting a bunch of letters from other survivors that were at that camp.
At the camp.
And I thought I was the only one. As a teenager who'd gone through so much trauma, I felt like for sure no one at this church camp, they're all from great families. And, and I thought, I was from a great family too. It just, what was going on behind closed doors wasn't great.
Yeah.
But that was sort of a picture, I think, of the future for me, that if I could find the courage to tell my story, it was bringing out all these other stories that had never been told. So I started writing back and forth with these other teenagers who'd had similar experiences. Dear Nicole, I too was sexually abused. I've never told anyone. Thank you for your courage. It was just over and over that whole summer. And it was then that I came across this verse. I remember sitting on my bedroom floor a couple of weeks after getting all of these letters, and just they were all scattered around me, and I'm sitting on my floor crisscross applesauce and I opened my Bible and I did the thing my pastor says not to do, which is just point and find a verse. Yes.
Yeah.
But that was the verse that would become everything to me. It was 2 Corinthians 1:3-4. It talks about how, God comforts us in all of our troubles so we can comfort others. And I think that was just a little bit of a taste of what was to come, but I was still scared, and you had said in the intro, this could have been life ending, and it really could have. I mean, I had fantasized about suicide, running away so many times. But this was sort of like giving me purpose. It was like the pain was so dark and so deep. And this was a shame that I thought, I would carry with me till the end of my life. This shame was so big. How would I ever want people to know about this horrible thing that I'd gone through? But yet this was exactly the thing that other people needed to find their freedom and to find their hope and to find their light. And so it almost became almost like a challenge. Like if a door opened for me to share about this horrible thing I'd gone through, and I trusted myself, my story, God, whatever, enough to talk, to tell, it always freed somebody else up. And then that's what the motivation was to keep going, to do it again.
I have so many questions. So first of all, in that moment when you were led, I'll say, to the front to share your story, you never shared it before, your mission being born. But I'm thinking when you had the courage at 14 to tell, who did you tell? You tell your mom?
My mom. Yeah.
And she believed you?
She did. Davia, I have met hundreds. I've met thousands of survivors of sexual abuse, and most of them tell me, I told my mom and she didn't believe me. Or she told me to be quiet. That's why my first book is called Hush.
Hush, yeah.
And so I feel very fortunate, very grateful that I had a mom that believed me, but I know I am not the normal.
Yeah.
And that makes me really sad.
I just think about that is very, very hard. But I think about even the risk your mom took to believe you.
Yes.
This was her husband.
That's right.
Right? And he was in the home.
Yes.
And so this abuse went on for years.
Yeah, they were married for 11 years.
Yeah.
He came into my life before I had memories, and my abuse started as early as 4.
Oh, my Lord.
Yeah, so it went on for nearly a decade. And this was, no one talked about things like sexual abuse when I was growing up. I didn't have language for it. He was well-known, respected, loved in our community. So, he told me it was our little secret.
Yeah.
No one,
Yeah.
all little girls go through this. No one talks about
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
I wouldn't see my mom again if I told. Who would believe me? They'd believe him. So all these reasons I kept this secret for so long. But finally at 14, I saw an open door to tell my mom, and I did. And
I think about all of the complexities of a child in that space. It's in your home with an adult that's supposed to be a trusted adult. In some instances, it's a privilege to have a secret with your adult, right? So there's that, or is it a burden to keep this? Like, it's probably all of those things. And as you aged, your body might respond. And then that makes you feel complicit. It's just, it is the cruelest thing. And when you said 4 years old, my granddaughter just turned 4. I cannot imagine what jail I would be under if somebody inappropriately looked at that little one, you know? And yet we all hold these stories that we don't know. We may hold some. I shared some things with you earlier. I'm not yet ready to share publicly, but then I'm like, I'm just now wondering, was there something that happened to me when I was younger? There must be many people even with stories like that. I don't know, maybe, I think, possibly, based on, and then to finally get to where you push through all of that secret keeping, threats for the well-being of the family, or even the well-being of your abuser, right? All of that weight. I learned that from reading your book. I think about the abuser may put their well-being on your hands as well. I hadn't thought about it. I'll be harmed if you tell. I hadn't.
Abusers typically are somebody the child knows, close to them, usually related. So there's such a dynamic there for the child to, well, first of all, you're not telling because you love this person. You trust them, like you said. And so, of course, I don't want them to get in trouble, because if he was always a monster, the child probably would tell. But they're not. You know, he was a good dad to me. He shot free throws with me every night. You know, he was at all my stuff. Like, there was that side that it's the grooming. It's the, you know, you are trusting and loving this person. And I had no reason not to, but I wanted that stuff to stop. And so you're exactly right. There's so many layers to it.
Yeah. My goodness. And so I'm so grateful, and that your mother believed you, and so sad that so many that choose to tell don't have someone who believes them, that they're somehow blamed for their own abuse. What did you do? Did you entice? Did you, those types of things. It's just unbelievable.
And it heaps more shame on the victim. And that's what I see now working with adult survivors, is it's not just the trauma of the abuse that we're trying to heal. It's also the trauma, the wound of the person that you trusted didn't do anything to stop it, or knew about it and let it keep going, or told you, we all go through this. It's it's the parent that didn't, as soon as they know, didn't do something to stop it, to make you know it wasn't your fault, and to protect you. That is almost as big of a wound as the abuse itself in adulthood.
So, good family, prominent man, your dad, your stepdad, when you told, and you tell the relationship, so people know who this is. I don't know, but people know who this is, right? In your world, in your circle. Like, what was that like? Were you afraid of the fallout for him? There had to have been. Yeah.
There was a lot of fear. I mean, it was like, okay, this is out. My mom believes me. She says, I don't know what we're going to do, but I'm going to figure it out. That felt like a relief, but it was like, all the things that he's told me would happen if I told on him, I'm scared they're going to happen, And so, I mean, for my story, I think it's a little bit unique in that my mom and I left the home and we were basically in hiding. He denied all of it. Wow. And we were supposed to go to court, like the first day of my freshman year of high school. It just felt horrible. And he was trying to find us everywhere we went. And we knew that he was going to kill us if he found us. So we were hiding. But 7 days after I told, he took his life.
Okay.
So that immediately, I remember I was so angry because I had kept this secret for so long. And it was like, I wanted to see justice.
Yeah, no justice.
But on the other hand, again, having met so many survivors that have to see their abuser at family reunions, at the grocery store, like, I'm grateful I didn't have that. But there's so many emotions at 14, and that's why I said I will never tell again.
So say more about that. You said you'd never tell again, but you did.
Yeah.
Over and over, and written books and helped other people tell their stories and be validated in their stories. So help me with the gap between I will never tell again and I have now made this my mission.
Yeah. Well, I think it was like I was so afraid because I had built this reputation in my little community, my little cornfield community, you know, where I was like the poster kid of our area. I was, you know, an athlete. I was a straight A student. I was homecoming queen. It was like I needed to I had to hold this up.
Yeah.
I didn't want, you know, me telling about something that somebody else was doing to me to shatter all of that. And so it was like I vowed I'm never going to tell anyone again. And I slapped a smile on, went back to school. I tried to bury the pain and move on. But, you know, it's not easy. It doesn't always work. And so as things were bubbling up, I'm trying to, you know, heal. I pray it away, whatever, but it wasn't working. And that's when I went to that camp and I felt safe enough to tell, because there's something about sharing your secret, telling your story. It's like it helps it not be a part of you anymore. And it invites community, authentic community. And so I think without thinking all of that through at 15, that's what happened at that youth camp. And then the response I received and feeling like God was also showing me like your pain can be used for purpose. That's where I just felt like I need to explore this. I feel like this is my purpose in life, is to, you know, this calling to be a voice because it mattered to other people. And I've always wanted to be a helper. I always have cared about, especially women and children. And so I felt like it kind of connected all the dots. But it, you know, it was still hard. And I tiptoed around for a long time. Even after 15, it was like, it was just in my heart. It's what I wanted to do.
You're still a kid at 15 years old. Like, to talk about life's purpose that's a big thing.
So
there are people my age still trying to figure out life purpose, right? So that's even that birthing from these terrible circumstances is another big thing to do. So you go through high school, you graduate from high school. When did you go to college and all of that? Tell me about when One Voice started to gain some structure.
Okay. Yeah. So I went through college, and like most people with trauma, we study psychology. So that happened.
Makes sense.
I was a college athlete. I was a basketball player. So I was really, that was my identity in college. Meanwhile, I had that dream, that purpose, that vision tucked within me, but not really knowing what to do with it. I thought I would end up just, you know, becoming a psychologist, have a private practice, counsel women, children in vulnerable situations. But my senior year of college, I was volunteering everywhere I could, like rape crisis centers, domestic violence shelters, hotlines, like everywhere where I could get involved. And I started shadowing a woman who went from the local rape crisis center to the local high schools and just did presentations about sexual harassment or rape or whatever. And, you know, I helped set up her PowerPoint and things like that. And one day I just said, you know, I think these kids would respond more to a real life story instead of like definitions. And she said, well, if you can find a survivor brave enough to tell her story, you let me know.
Wow.
I got you. And so that's where it started. I then went out, and the next time it was like there was a line of high school students waiting to talk to me. And it was so different. And so it was like a snowball. It's like one high school then talked to the next, and then there's a church youth group. And it was people who believe in the power of a story, of freeing young people from shame, helping them to find their purpose and hope in life. And not hide all this yucky stuff. They wanted me to come talk, and I was willing at that point. And that's where One Voice started.
You know, said a real key word that is the prison, and that's shame.
That's right.
Shame is the prison. And it's so misapplied in this space because you're the victim.
Yes.
You're not complicit. All of these things, yet you carry the shame of what someone did to you and took from you, right? In this circumstance and many others, shame is such a prison. And so to be heard, to be validated. I imagine that first time you shared that story and no one's head blew off, no one was pointing fingers, all the things that you would fear would happen, you were actually embraced and used. And that is incredible, incredible. I know that your mission has taken lots of avenues, right? I've got a couple of your books right here that I ordered. Your first one, Hush and Breathe. I've been reading through them. And you have a very good balance between personal narrative, conversation, and information, equipping. It's beautiful between the two books. I can understand why your mission, your ministry has grown. I know that you've moved from, or into, I wouldn't say from, into the trafficking space in general. I know that you do some speaking. Can you say a little bit more about the materials, the classes, like what are you doing? Flesh out one voice for me.
Yeah, I got you. Well, it really started out with just the speaking, and I was traveling to lots of colleges and high schools and conferences, sharing my story. And what I felt like for years was I would go to a city, I would light a fire, and hope that all the therapists and the social workers there could handle those who came out and shared their story for the first time because of my story. That's often what was happening. And then over time, I felt like I wanted to leave folks with more they could chew on. My story, lots of stories of others in these books. And so that's why I started writing. And then 10 years ago, I started seeing and noticing lots of emails from survivors who are not only survivors of sexual abuse, but survivors of sex trafficking. So they were relating to my story, saying, Nicole, I was also sexually abused in my home, and I too wanted to run away, and I did. Where I didn't, I always talked about fantasizing about it, where they felt like they ran away from the torture and the trauma and found the person that would be the answer to all of their dreams, but ended up being their worst nightmare because they ended up being trafficked. So that really lit a new fire under me, because I was realizing at the time when I was a child wanting to run away from my stepfather, I was the highest risk person in America to be groomed by a trafficker, because that's the highest risk number, is the ones who have been abused in their home and run away. They're vulnerable. Okay. And they have that wound that traffickers notice. They find them and they start a relationship. And so that really impacted me greatly. And it was like, once you know something, you can't unknow it. And so I wanted to be more of a voice in that area. So, my first move was basically I went undercover with a film crew to Cambodia in 2012. And I went into the brothels and interviewed girls and helped them tell their story. And it was so heartbreaking. And I came back, and that's when I was like, I know trafficking's going on here too, and I want to do something about it. So started that work and started the nonprofit, which is still running, One Voice for Freedom. And then COVID happened. So I was going back and forth to Cambodia, Dominican Republic, East Africa, doing lots of presentations there in villages, talking about sex trafficking, and then also here in the States. But then my whole speaking career got canceled because of the pandemic and also all of my international trips. And so I just sat with that and thought, well, I've been doing this for almost 20 years. This is like my identity. I don't know what else, God gives me an idea, I do it, but this is like life-changing. And so that's when I started really interacting with a lot of survivors, adult survivors of sexual abuse, who were struggling with the isolation of the pandemic, feeling very alone, and needing connection. And so that's when I made a big pivot. And what I'm doing now is running these survivor groups. So they're online survivor groups, created a film, created journal prompts so survivors each week, they watch the film, They answer the journal prompts in their own time, and then we meet over Zoom. And so people from all over the world are meeting weekly to talk about the material. And it's been such a really, honestly, it's one of the most sacred communities I've found. It's so beautiful. People put down all the masks they wear during the week, and they show up as they are. We talk about the struggles of healing. We encourage each other, and everybody leaves better than they were. And it's just such a really, really cool thing. Yeah.
That is just incredible. The name of your groups is
Unleashed.
Unleashed.
Yeah. Unleashed.
What an incredible, the imagery I get with just the word unleashed. I wish we'll make sure that all of your contact information is shown at the end of the video, because I imagine, I'm looking at even the graphics on the 2 books that I do have, and I can imagine what that looks like. There was a question that was brewing, and I lost it. Golly, I lost it. Well, I'm just so intrigued by your story. And of course, you start to think about your own mission. You and I talked a little bit before we sat down in the chair about how I've kind of touched in ministries here and there. And I'm getting the time to slow. We're going to go over, y'all, just so you know. We're going to go over today. We're not going to slow it. We're not going to cut it short. And wondering, is there a space? Is this, where prompting comes? Is this what's going to be next? What do I do? How do I interface with you to also lean into that community? Oh, I know what I was thinking. You talked about Cambodia. I've been real privileged, my husband and I, to travel a number of places, and Cambodia was one of them. We went to Siem Reap to see all the temples and all. And people often ask me, where's your favorite place? What would you go back to? And Cambodia is the one place where I said, I don't ever want to go again. And it was because I felt I know there are many other places where trafficking is happening. It's happening here, right? It's happening everywhere. But it was so in your face that I didn't know what my role was. I didn't know as a traveler if I'm somehow contributing to the ills by bringing money to people who exploit these children, or am I just didn't know. And I felt confused and even guilty. We had a guide, and you're very much instructed, don't give any money, don't give any food when children come up to you. I've been to other places of great poverty, but something about Cambodia, I remember seeing girls that must have been 12, 13 years old in full face of evening looking makeup and sequined gowns on scooters at the market. And they just ride up, and some man will pop on the back and they go off. I remember it was hot. Never been that hot in my life. And I'd forgotten my fan. I always have a fan. Got one in my basement. And went back up to the hotel. My husband was just waiting just outside the doors. And he said, in the 10 minutes that it took me to go up to the hotel room and come back down, how many times he was propositioned. It was creepy. He said, from children. He said they were children. And even we probably stayed in the nicest hotel room I've ever been in that we've ever rented. And you didn't want to look out the window because kids were playing in the gutters. This is what you could see with the gutters. We're in the city, so we weren't looking at, water or, a beautiful skyline. We were in the city. And I left there just confused. So you mentioned Cambodia first. Was that one of your first international?
Yep.
Were you in what? I didn't even go to Phnom Penh, so I don't know. Where were you? You were in Phnom Penh?
Yeah, and then in the countryside, the villages. And that's where most of my work ended up being.
Okay.
When I would return, because I had met a mother in one of the very, very poor country villages who had unknowingly sold her 2 daughters into slavery.
Sure.
Because,
Food.
someone came to the village and said, put your girls on this bus. We're going to teach them a new language. We're going to give them a job in the restaurant. I mean, they're going to go to classes. It's every single mother's dream is to provide something like that. And that was her situation unknowingly. And then eventually she never heard from her daughters again. And then one of them was returned. I can hardly talk about it. With one eye was completely gouged out from all the torture. And then she ended up being in a coma and died 2 weeks before I arrived. So I met this mother in the deepest grief I have ever heard. It just touched me so much that if we could beat these traffickers to the villages that they were targeting, these very poor villages that couldn't provide for the children, if we could beat them there and tell the story so that they don't unknowingly put their girls on those buses, we would save so many lives. And so that's where it really started for me.
Wow. I can't even as a mom imagine that kind of grief or that kind of desperation. Did you have a sense that you were making a difference, or did you feel like you're sticking your finger in a dam? Because it's generational and cultural, and poverty is, the villages will probably always be poor.
That's right, yeah.
So how...
Well, I remember my grandmother calling me before. So I went back every year and did these presentations. We would raise money here for shoes for children in the villages, and they would walk, the parents and everybody would walk for miles and miles to get the pair of shoes, and they would sit down and listen to the educational presentation. So that was where the impact was being made, and that was my mission. Before I left for, I think it was my third trip, my grandmother called me and she said, because she worries about me.
Sure.
She said, Nicole, I just needed to call before you leave and tell you that you're not going to end trafficking. And I thought, she's right. It is so big and horrible. And like you said, are you even making a dent? But for me, it has always been about one. If you make difference for one, because I think in my life, I think of the one person who reached out and asked me if I was okay, who looked beneath the surface and all the fake smiles and all of that, the awards, and really checked on me, or, said something nice, or, bought my family something that when my mom and I were struggling after my stepbrother's suicide, mowed our lawn when we couldn't do it. I just think of the one thing. If everybody could do one thing, it matters. And if it's just for one person, it matters. And so that's where it kept me going, even if it felt like it was just barely making a dent. If it was for one, mattered.
Well, we talk about, we know that we have a common faith, and Bible talks about Jesus leaving leave the 99. That's right. To pursue the one. And so even the title, the name of your organization, One Voice.
Oh, that gave me chills. I've never thought of that in all these years.
One voice. It could be one voice at a time.
That's right.
One voice here, when we think about historical figures, we don't usually think about historical community. We'd have names. One name, Martin Luther King, this person, that person, one voice. We'll talk about Nicole Bromley, and we'll talk about this mother in the village, or the high school student that was validated and freed who also used her voice. Or, we were talking about people that we know even in this community that are involved in this trafficking space to try to free women. We know individual people who are putting themselves out there to make a difference. And so, I think that's much to be encouraged about. I just wondered how you processed the gravity, the enormity of the circumstances of the problem versus, or in context with the work that you're doing with the individuals you get to interface with. Seeing the value of that and not being overwhelmed by what your grandmother said. You're not going to end this thing. This thing has been going on since the first sin, right? Right. This is a thing that's in the heart of people.
Even when I started speaking just about sexual abuse in my story,
yeah,
it felt so big.
Yeah.
But, and you think you're not making a difference. But I think what has always helped me is to take just look at one step at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can do this thing, I see the problem in my local community, within my friend group, or, what's right here.
Yeah.
If you look at the big picture, a lot of people get paralyzed and they don't want to do anything. They just hope it goes away. But if you do one thing, it seems to activate the next thing, which activates the next thing. And it's like, before you know it, you are doing a really big thing that you never thought you could do if you hadn't started. So for me, it's always been about that one next step, and trusting that it will take you as far as it'll go.
Thank you for using your life.
Yeah. It's a privilege to me.
And your very tough story to bring light. You talk about, I think it's colloquial now, not just in my profession, but that everybody just wants to be seen and heard. And when we're under difficult circumstances, or even if it's just depression, anxiety, abuse, whatever it is, the lie that we believe is that we're the only one, or that ours is the worst, or that nobody sees me, nobody really knows. And to be a space that allows someone to be seen, to know they are really seen, that you can really be heard, that even your one voice can make a difference in your life and in the lives of others. That, man, if nothing else, is God's work. That is God's work. He creates us as individuals. I always say, like, we come into this world one at a time, naked and alone, even if you're multiple. You come one at a time, naked and alone. That's how you're going out. And you want to meet your maker, having lived the life that he designed for you to live. And not saying that God designed for you to be a victim of abuse. That was sin. That should not have happened. But you gave it. You gave it to God, and you opened up your story, and he has multiplied it in ways that I wonder when, I don't know what it's like when we get to heaven and we get to get our rewards. Like, is it a movie that's played, all the people that we don't get to see? Who did we touch? There's impact we will never know right here. And I wonder, do we get to know? But be assured, lady, that there is impact beyond what you know, beyond what you can see, that which is multiplied in the people that you touch, in your calm, beautiful presence. I'm blown away. I've been following you for a couple of years, and I always wanted you to be on my podcast. I think I reached out the first time, maybe second season. I don't know what happened. I just got back to you finally when you said, I'd be honored to. I'm like, yeah, really? And we made it happen. And so my prayer, we prayed before we even rolled the cameras, but my prayer is that somebody feels seen. And I'm sure it's going to happen, that somebody feels seen. And we'll make sure that they know how to find you, or me, or whomever can help them to move along in their stories to free them. Yeah. Anything you want me to make sure people know, or anything if you feel unsaid? I'm going to give you the last word if you have one.
Yeah, I'm grateful for a space and for a wonderful person who wants to allow stories to be told, where shame doesn't have to reign people's lives, and to let people know that there's freedom, there's hope, that, people have value. Yeah. And when you've been hurt, it's not your fault. So I think that is such an important thing. And for you to use your platform for an issue like this that most people don't want to talk about. It's really special. I'm just grateful for this space and for your presence and for your heart for people to find freedom and to know that what they've gone through doesn't have to rule the rest of their life. I mean, what a beautiful thing to let people know about.
Thank you.
I'm forever call you my local Oprah.
I need Oprah to hear people call me Oprah. People do that all the time.
I bet they do.
All the time. I keep telling the girl, sit down. Let me take your space. Well, let's go ahead and wrap up. We always toast our conversation. Tales from the shaker. And so today I made us espresso martinis with bourbon. It's equal parts bourbon, cold brew espresso, Kahlua. I added a little bit of brown sugar, simple syrup, and a couple of dashes of bitters to make it. Oh, I added a little bit of vanilla coffee creamer just to make it a little extra frothy. Shook it up, shaved a little chocolate on top, and added some beans, some coffee beans. Sounded like it was a lot of steps, but it didn't feel like it was. It went pretty quickly, I thought. But anyway, it's really delicious. Cheers to you, my dear. All right, and we have to sip when you clink your glasses. All right, y'all. This has been another very privileged conversation I've gotten to have on Tales from the Shaker. I'm convinced. I know it in my knower that you've heard something in this conversation that will touch you or someone you know. Somebody you know, if it's not you, has this story. And so let's see them. Let's validate them. Let's not allow the shame to keep them in prison. And let's shake some things up in your life and in others. Thank you. I can't wait to hear your feedback from this show. And I don't even know how to end it. Blessings to you. Blessings to you. Cheers.